you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a knife, just to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Good morning, folks. It is Wednesday, June 3rd. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and you guys can follow me on Twitter if you don't already, right there at Peoples_Pundit. All right, so voter fraud in Pennsylvania and recovery and riots, or recovery amid the riots, all on today's show, as well as some of the election results from yesterday. We still have a lot of votes being counted. A lot of states are still counting their votes. Not surprising, given some of the ways things are being done. But one of them is Pennsylvania. So given that we had Pennsylvania today, and we also had the lawsuit in Pennsylvania, like I said, I'm not going to go looking for instances of potential, fraud, right? An area that's ripe for fraud. Let's just focus on the areas that Democrats are filing these lawsuits and where Republicans are trying to counter them to look to see whether or not there is indeed potential for fraud. All right, but first and foremost, and then we'll get you know what? Scratch that. First and foremost, let's take a look at the private sector jobs report from ADP, because if you watched earlier in the week and even some of the stuff last week, the ISM number from the PMI showed that manufacturing increased more than was forecasted. Although it remained in contraction, the overall economy was starting to grow again. Or at least it indicates that the overall economy is starting to grow again, which is, look, folks, it's faster than most of the forecasts had suggested out there. Now we get these job numbers for May. This is private sector only. And this is telling us that, of course, it's a big number. It sucks, and we don't want to minimize millions of people who lost their jobs. But it's a lot less than expected. And the number for April, which was ugly, appears to have been revised down. And that would suggest, because the disparity is so big, that would suggest that the worst is behind us. We hit our peak. Hence the riots, right, folks? I mean, if you have cities, all of the US, major cities in the U.S. burning to the ground and businesses being destroyed, it just seems like one more thing that is trying to screw the American worker. I was watching, and I hate bringing up other shows on this show, but I was watching most of my family loves Tucker. And watching Tucker last night, he said something that Laura and I were talking about. This is really the only movement, and it is a revolution. I mean, if the people who are doing this, they think it's a revolution, so I suggest we take them seriously. But this is the first one that's like anti-worker. Most revolutions come from the ground and go up. This is an elitist-driven revolution from the top down, and it's anti-worker. Everything about it, while they make it about race, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, the numbers, which we'll look at from Heather McDonald today, really suggest this is more about class. But they want us to look at race because, like we spoke about yesterday, we're so divided as a nation. We don't have common ground, common principles, common virtues, common shared glory, shared suffering, all the things that wrap up a nation. So they want us to focus on that. That creates division. But the end result is making it harder. And the resilience of the American worker, the resilience of the American business owner, the American businessman and woman, whatever, is incredible considering all of the adversity that they face. So let's bring up this jobs report. Let's take a look at this. Private sector employment down far less than expected in May. Peak losses behind us. The ADP National Employment Report came in at 2,760,000 jobs lost in May. That sounds like a horrific number, I know. And, the graphic, it's still warranted because this is due to the lockdown. All right. But in reality, this is millions and millions. It's significantly lower than the not just consensus forecast, but the actual range. All right. So the ADP National Employment Report found private sector employment fell by 2.7 roughly million jobs in May, far less than expected. The loss in April was also less than initially reported, and the data suggests the peak is behind us. All right. You might notice in this, and this is a horrific graph, I know. I mean, it's just ugly to look at considering we were at all-time highs. The rate of increase was ticking off in the last 3 years, and it was nice. It was nice to look at, but maybe we'll be looking at it again sooner rather than later. I think the outcome of the election will have a lot to do with that. But like I have been saying, if there's a pop in August and September, then we'll be looking at a situation that would be very difficult from a historical perspective to forecast the outcome of an election. Not talking about glorified poll readers like everybody else out there, or everybody else who looks at a Secretary of State webpage and looks at voter registration from the Secretary of State and thinks they're a damn expert. I'm talking about sophisticated historical indicators that tell us who is likely to win and who is not. How our model is able to outperform the polls all the time. All right. This will make it difficult for somebody like us who has a much bigger picture model if this starts popping back in August and September, because we simply don't have much to compare it to. All right. So forecasts range from a low of 11 million. All right. Some people were expecting losses of upwards of 11 million. The high end of this forecast range was only 3.3. Let me say that again. The high end didn't even come close to where it actually came in for the month of May. We're looking at 500,000 jobs off from the high end of the forecast. And it's reversed because we're looking at negative numbers. So usually the low is a lower number and the high is a higher number. These are negative numbers. So technically, in terms of whole numbers, it is a lower number. All right. The consensus forecast was for a loss of 8,663,000 jobs. Again, we came in at about 2.6 and change, 2.67. That is a significant beat for a jobs report. Significant. And you might notice, because we go over these reports all the time, even when the economy was soaring, Mr. Murray over at Moody's, or whatever, I don't want to get his name wrong, but the Moody's analyst, because this is a joint report conducted by ADP and Moody's Analytics. The Moody's analyst always had something negative to say. The damn job report could beat by 100, 200,000, and he would still find somewhere in the report to find something negative. I mean, it's just one of those guys, right? Well, at least in the era of Trump. He has been silent for the last 2 months, which I find at least noteworthy enough to mention right now on the show. So here we have a beat of 6 million jobs, and mum's the word from him. So we did get it from Ahu, though, and he said, or Ahu, I think I butchered it last time and got corrected. Ahu Yildirimaz, I'm sorry if I killing your name, Ahu, but this is the co-head of the ADP Institute for Research, and he said, the impact of COVID-19 crisis continues to weigh on businesses of all sizes. While the labor market is still reeling from the effects of the pandemic, job loss likely peaked in April, as many states have begun a phased reopening of businesses. All right, and then let's look just at the 1 year. I know it's ugly to look at, but as you can see, steady drop. I mean, that was the trend before. All right. Well, the last recession that we have in here, of course, was the Great Recession, the financial crisis, and we did not see that kind of loss at this rate. So it could tell us one of two things. It could tell us this is horrific, or it could tell us this thing is going to pop back because it's more like a hurricane or the BP oil spill, as we spoke about last week, an artificial event that did this in, okay? By company size. Oh, again, the April total of jobs lost was revised from 20,236,000 to 19,557,000. And somebody on Twitter said, well, how could this be good news? Great news. Because it said this is great news. Well, it's simple. Those are people. That's almost 1 million people who did not lose their job that we previously thought lost their job. Everyone knows the numbers suck. But that's 1 million people whose lives are better than we thought they were a month ago. Yes, we lost 2.67 million this month, for the month of May, that is, last month. But that is 6 million and change less than we thought we were going to lose this month. It is good news. We already knew that the labor market was going to give us ugly numbers. It was only a matter of how ugly they were going to be. This is by far on the less ugly side of the spectrum. If somebody would have told me these numbers last month, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have said, nope, it's going to still be around at least 6-8 million. Roughly where the consensus forecast is. And that high end of a loss of 11 million for the month of May, that was not out of the realm of possibility. And if you look at the totality of forecasts, the reason why the consensus was over 8 million is because they were all heavily weighted to the low end of that forecast spectrum. So not many people thought it was going to come in even at 3.5 million. That was just the low end. Most expected this to be an 8 to 10 million loss. Or let's be more accurate and say 6 to 10 million loss. All right. So by company size, this is always painful to see. Small businesses took a pretty nice hit. They lost nearly 500,000 jobs, 435,000. Medium businesses with 50 to 499 employees, they took a loss of 722,000. Now, when we were talking about PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, and we were trying to explain what the definition is of a small business to the Small Business Administration, small and medium are essentially wrapped up. There's a lot of overlap there. That is considered a small business. large employees, large businesses, according to ADP, were not eligible unless there were certain franchises. But okay, large businesses, no surprise there. They employ a lot of the sectors that took a hit. The biggest hit that we saw in the census data, that was 1.6 million. All right, goods producing. This is one of the areas of the economy where under Donald Trump, we saw a real nice snapback. And that was creating a lot of the upward pressure on wages. These are better paying jobs for workers. Or I would say, I don't want to say low skill. I hate that term because, mining is a skill. Manufacturing is a skill. Construction is a skill. So I hate that word, low skill jobs. In an apocalyptic scenario, there will be no need for a high skill computer engineer. Right? Who will be low skilled then? All right. So anyway, construction lost 22,000. That's an area. And if you guys subscribe to PPD, last prior report beat the consensus forecast eightfold. It was an unexpected gain. And then we did see some bigger losses after that, but not enough to really offset it. So the loss of 22,000 jobs through this month, that's about right. That's about what I would expect. Manufacturing did take a very big hit, 719. The industrial production indicator from the Federal Reserve, it took the first month that this pandemic, the lockdown was in effect, it was like a multi-decade record low and the biggest drop over multi-decades that had ever occurred month to month. And then the report after that was the biggest. So it got hammered. The manufacturing series in the overall industrial production, which also includes mining, utilities, that took a massive hit. So this is sad because we had seen the largest number of manufacturing jobs ever. More people than at any other time were employed in the manufacturing sector. Openings were the largest since before the WTO, before NAFTA. So that's sad to see. But again, I'm feeling more optimistic about how quickly this could snap back. We're not going to recover to 100% quickly anyway. We could always recover 100%. It took time after the Great Recession to do so, but we did it. We're not going to do that in a snap. I think that would be unrealistic to expect and ridiculous to assume. But we can recover a lot of this if the damn world doesn't burn. But anyway, service providing jobs, no shocker. Think Disney. Think all of the restaurants and bars. They took a big hit. Leisure and hospitality, 105,000 again this month, took a much bigger hit last time. Financial activities actually took 200,000. But look what Cuomo has done. If you think that doesn't have reverberations, you're crazy. Trade, transportation, and utilities took a massive hit, 826,000. But, overall, if you really want to see franchise, it took 254,000. If you want to see more, you can click on this link at the bottom of the report, and you will see more detailed about it. I will say this, today I was able to walk into my where I get my haircut and make an appointment. My barber was back. I was stoked. Made an appointment for tomorrow. Things are starting to come back around. One location, because that is a franchise where I go. I just use the same guy, but it is a franchise that unfortunately lost one of the locations in this city, which was like an alternative location. Once I got really tight with this guy, I guess a lot of people are like that. Once you find somebody you like, you kind of stick with them and that's it. But one of the locations in this city is permanently closed. It's not going to reopen. So that's part of the reality, that's it in real life right there. All right. But going back to the ISM report the other day, this was showing signs of life. The employment series in the ISM report was showing signs of life. It was suggesting that the economy not only stopped, not only arrested, but began to grow again. So there was 100 and something consecutive months of growth. It was the longest ever in the history of the series. And then we had 1 month where we slipped into contraction. Overall activity. I'm not just talking about the PMI indicator. It slipped into contraction, and now here we are again, right? So this is good. What I'm telling you to take away from this is that there is now some actual data, and the ADP report is actual payroll data. The employment situation report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a household survey. The initial headline number that we get is basically a glorified poll. It is a household survey, and then later is revised with actual real data. It is important to note that this only goes through the period leading up to the 12th, as does the Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly jobs report. That's why it's revised. 2 months ago, when we did the report on the show, we went over it. I told you that number was going to be revised higher. 20 million is going to go to 25. Don't be shocked when that number takes off to 25 million. That didn't happen. It was revised down. Even if next month we get a revision in May and it gets revised from 2.67 to 3 point something. Let's say it's good chunk more than initially was reported here. That is still not enough to offset what clearly is the trend, that was the peak in April, and that businesses were doing their level best to try to bounce back and recover. It would be a much uglier situation if we didn't get the payroll protection program. I'll tell you that, folks. A much, much uglier situation. Much. All right. So I will say this, though, too. These riots, okay, which before we go to break, I do just want to play something. Let me just make sure I hat tip the person right. Yesterday, we played a clip of Comrade de Blasio, blaming Donald Trump. The ignorance to human nature from these people in these leaders of major U.S. cities, the ignorance to human nature is just astounding. You show weakness, the mob will riot. You give them blood in the water to smell, and they will go into a feeding frenzy. Bill de Blasio goes out there, my heart's with these people. Andrew Cuomo, who hates Bill de Blasio, by the way, so everybody knows. Andrew Cuomo hates Bill de Blasio. Hates him. Can't stand him. He himself, though, criticizing de Blasio now because he's looking for a scapegoat. He is the governor of that state. He's looking for a scapegoat now. So now he's throwing him under the bus, leaking to everybody who will listen. He himself said that those were not really rioters. These aren't angry people. These are young, idealistic people who think they can change the world. They still believe they can make a difference. 3 hours later, he was singing a totally different tune. That was right about the time when de Blasio came out and blamed President Trump. This is what happened yesterday. Make sure I get the hat tip here, all right? I'm sorry. That's funny. He deserves that. They got really close to Gracie Mansion yesterday. Part of me was thinking something I had to ask God for forgiveness for. Because they created this mess. You cannot show weakness. You cannot show weakness. It doesn't matter whether or not they have a legitimate beef. You cannot tolerate destruction like this. Because look at that employment report. Look at it. law-abiding citizens, hardworking Americans, innovative small business owners, they are trying to come back from what was an unlawless lockdown that they never gave their stamp for. They never gave public approval for, despite what the polls say. Nobody ever voted on this. Nobody ever voted on it. And here they are trying to make a comeback. They are trying like hell to make a comeback. And you have people in these streets. New York is going to be, it's going to take a long time for New York to come back. The financial district was in serious trouble before this stuff happened. Macy's, an iconic department store where our children have been giving letters to Santa for decades, which funds the Christmas parade, was destroyed. Large parts of it large parts of the store were destroyed. And and this is why it matters, because it will have an impact on the economy. And we're actually going to have something on that pretty soon. When this all started to kick off, one of the first things that I thought of was, you know what? How badly could this stop what looks like a quick recovery? How badly could it stop? Could it halt these wonderful, law-abiding, hardworking citizens? Could it halt their march back to recovery? And we're going to have something on that. We have a couple of historical examples that we can actually look at. The LA riots, after the LA riots in 93, which, by the way, Bill Clinton invoked the Insurrection Act during those riots. Everybody's pretending like Don Lemon, the moron, and others are pretending like this has never happened before. It absolutely has. But it took decades for LA to come back. Rudy Giuliani took New York and fixed it. We had our riot in New York. He learned from it. He stabilized that city. It still took years and years for that city to come back. Bloomberg was successful largely because he continued the policies of Mayor Giuliani, both policing and when it comes to crowd control. He continued his policies, but it still took years for those cities to come back, to progress. Many people abandoned those cities, my family included. Part of the exodus out of New York City. The Italian exodus to Jersey. Place was a dump. I love it, and I'm always going to love it, but pre-Rudy Giuliani, you couldn't go to an ATM at nighttime. And I was young at the time, but you could not go to an ATM. My parents would never have stopped. There was always somebody sleeping in one. There was always some crack addict 20, 30 feet away waiting to club you for the money you just took out. It was bad. It was horrible. And I think, you know what? I think Americans have gotten spoiled. We were talking about some harsh realities yesterday. Here's another one. We've been spoiled. Think about what Benedict Anderson was talking about in Imagine Communities, like we spoke about yesterday. Shared glory and shared suffering. There are way too many people here that have never shared in our suffering. There are way too many younger generations who have no idea what it means to truly suffer, to struggle, to live in conditions like that. And they're the ones, demanding we return back. Proposals that now sitting members of Congress have signed on to, where we defund the police, op-eds in the New York Times. Do these people know what they're asking for? Order is key. No order, no economy. No order, no liberty. This is basic John Locke stuff. Treatise on government, folks. It was kind of a big deal with our founding fathers. They kind of took a few ideas when they created the Constitution, when they wrote the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence, you might notice a few similar words in that document, but these people have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They've never sat down and read why it's important to have order and security, what it means to the state of nature and liberty. They have no clue. No shared suffering. No shared suffering. All right. When we get back, there's a couple of things about the elections before we get into Pennsylvania. There are a couple of things about the election results last night that I think are very important and that we should discuss. All right. There was more than a handful of states that voted yesterday. Some did not have Donald Trump's Republican primary, is not the nomination primary. Some, most did. So there's some interesting things that we can compare there. All of the votes aren't counted, so I'm going to be careful with some of the declarations. Donald Trump has been, even though, I'll be the first one to tell you he's in trouble and he's vulnerable. But Donald Trump has been setting vote records and vote share records for incumbent presidents like crazy. He started with Iowa and he just kept going. There are millions of people who are going to vote for this man no matter what. No matter what. And there's some things, that I'm seeing with the Democratic primary, even though Biden, he polls really well. When the votes are actually cast, there's like this, it's becoming now, something is jumping out at me and it's becoming a real pattern. And I can see it, just as easily. I don't know why or if and why anybody else can't. All right. But I do. All right. So anyway, but let's do our little break / spiel. When we come back, we'll take a look at them. It is voter enthusiasm, CJ. It's a big deal. We'll take a look at some of the states. I'll ask the API to refresh, but I also will answer the question that I missed from yesterday, which is, do these protesters have a legitimate grievance? Okay. And we did some research. I thought I knew some numbers, but I was hoping there would be some more updated numbers. And there was from last year with policing. So the last thing I had fresh in my mind was from the prior year that data was available. All right. And now we have more, so I can actually give some better numbers that'll more accurately answer the question. All right. But it is 10:33 on Wednesday, June 3rd. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. Follow me on Twitter if you don't already, right there at Peoples_Pundit. All right. Don't forget, folks, trying to get more people over to YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel when you get there. We had a nice little run yesterday again, and hit the notification bell to let you know when we're about to go live. And also like the page People's Pundit Daily on Facebook. We're trying to beef that puppy up as well. Ultimately, the best way to support the show and how we get you and bring you these voter files like we're going to do today, which everyone hides from you and will not show you, is by your support. So the best way to do so is to subscribe to PPD. And you can do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com and clicking on digital subscriptions, or take the short link, ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. Thank you to all those who have done so since this show started. There has absolutely been an increase, and we love you for it. All right. Let me answer, because we were talking about the riots. Let me answer that first, and then we'll jump into the election results. Okay. There is the question generally, and I can't put it up on the screen because it was from yesterday, but it generally was, is there really a systemic problem in policing, right? Is there systemic means to define what the hell they mean when they say systemic racism? There's systemic racism in the Justice Department. Systemic means that it's institutional and it's by design. So it's in the system. It's like a cancer, and it's by design. So when they say systemic police racism, they mean that most police forces are racist, their policies and policing policies are racist, and it's by design. And yesterday, Laura and I were looking at some of the protests, and one guy said, they declared it's systemic police racism. They declared war on the black community, and we're not even allowed to carry guns. Who took your guns away? Who did you vote for and allow to take your guns away? Do the police take your guns away? Only when you're carrying them illegally. Why are they illegal? Why is it illegal to carry a firearm without a permit that's almost impossible to get in the city and even greater state of New York? Whose fault is that? Who voted for those people? Did Rudy Giuliani take your guns away? Did he put it in the state constitution? Did George Pataki? Who, when you apply for a firearms permit, who reviews that permit? You voted for these people. You did this to yourself. And you did it for the promise of social benefits. I mean, the country's burning. I think we have to drop the fear of being politically incorrect. The black community, for promise of social assistance, has forfeited some of their natural rights. Lots of them. Speaking of John Locke. So typically, when there are police interactions in urban areas, many of them who have firearms, it's important to understand before we talk about these numbers, illegally are possessing these firearms. All right? All right, so here's the number. In 2019, and this is according to the Washington Post database, and I will read from a column as well from Heather McDonald, who wrote The Diversity Delusion, if you guys don't know. Thanks to Tim, I got a signed copy of it. And Heather McDonald had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and she's been arguing there is no systemic police racism problem. It just doesn't exist. But here are the most latest numbers from the Washington Post. In 2019, police officers shot total, doesn't matter race, 1,004 people in the United States. Out of, again, a country of over 300 million, they shot 1,004. Most of these people were armed or were presenting the officer some kind of danger. African Americans represented about a quarter, about 25% of those who were killed by cops last year. The total number is 235. The numbers have changed over the last few years, over the last 4 or 5 years, but overall the percentage has roughly stayed about the same. But the share of black victims is less than what the crime rate would predict, since police shootings are a function of how often officers encounter armed and violent suspects. In 2018, the latest year for official data on that, well, published anyway, African Americans made up 53% of known homicide offenders in the United States and committed about 60% of robberies, though they only represent 13% of the population. And this is why I get into this. Is this really about race or is it about class? Is it because they are not permitted upward mobility in this society? We talked about this yesterday. There is a political party that is invested in the black community remaining downtrodden. That is a reality. The police fatally shot. Let's talk about who's unarmed, right? They killed 9 unarmed African Americans that year. 19 whites, and I'm talking about 2019. So let me say this again, just to be clear, because that was a little blubber. The police fatally shot with a gun, bang. Unarmed blacks, 9. Unarmed whites, 19 for the year 2009. That's according to the Washington Post database. That's down from 38 and 32% respectively. In 2015, the Post defined unarmed broadly to include such cases as a suspect in Newark, New York, who had a loaded handgun in his car during a police chase. In 2018, there were 7,407 black homicide victims. Assuming a comparable number of victims last year, those 9 unarmed black victims of police shootings represent, are you ready? I told this to Laura this morning, 0.1% of all African Americans killed in 2019. By contrast, a police officer is 8.5 times more likely to be killed by an African American male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a police officer. And I'm not going to get into the Chicago stuff. I'm simply saying when we talk about, and I do think that blacks are unfairly targeted, not for killing and straight murder in the streets. But I do think generally they are profiled, and that is based on policies that you police where the crime is. So it will necessarily lead to more police-civilian interactions in those areas. I think the real problem here is a class problem. It's the problem of them not being able or allowed or encouraged, maybe is a better word, to leave these neighborhoods or better these neighborhoods. I think that Bob Woodson was correct last night when he said that at the top you have the white liberal, and their interest is to use that as a political force. And just below that white liberal, you have community leaders who get their pockets stuffed with money. They live fat and high on the hog to be leaders of these communities, and nothing ever changes because that's their role. This is about failed leadership in their own communities. Anyway, let's and that's not to say, again, that's not to say they don't get unfairly targeted. But the question yesterday was, are they out there gunning down young black men in the street? Look, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, BLM, as an organization, the hashtag first appeared after the Trayvon Martin shooting down here in Florida. The jury got that verdict correct. Trayvon Martin was beating the snot out of George Zimmerman. He could have taken the gun, and according to George Zimmerman, he was reaching for the gun, and George shot him. He didn't even need to be reaching for the gun, frankly. He could have just feared from the beating his life was in danger, and he defended himself. That was not a police officer gunning down a young black man in the street. But that's where the hashtag first appeared. Now they're a movement about systemic police racism, among other things, but that's their main topic. How did they get to be that way a year later in Ferguson with Michael Brown? Hands up, don't shoot. That was the first actual protest. That was the first actual organized protest that Black Lives Matter put together. That is what got their start. It's built on a lie. Michael Brown never put his hands up. Michael Brown never said don't shoot. What he did was try to take Officer Wilson's gun. What he did was assault a police officer. And he got shot for it. I submit to you, whether you are black, white, Asian, Indian, Hispanic, if you go to take a cop's gun, you're going to get shot. Or at least there's a very high likelihood that you are going to be shot. It doesn't matter what color you are. It's ridiculous. But we had to go through this whole thing. One city burn. Fake news for a month. Even longer until Barack Obama's own Justice Department released a report with Eric Holder, a racist, as the attorney general, confirming that that was a lie. The entire organization was built on a lie, and it hurts their cause. It hurts their cause when you ask others who don't share your experiences, whether it's white America or Asian America. It hurts your cause when you ask them to believe a lie. When you submit that case as evidence of systemic police racism. Because it's not. That was a lie. The very case where your hashtag first popped up on Twitter was self-defense. In the case of George Zimmerman, the very first protest you organized included a rally call that was a complete lie. Hands up. Don't shoot. Never happened. Never happened. So the answer to that question is no. The numbers are not there. Do they get harassed often unfairly? Absolutely. I have black friends. I know they get harassed unfairly. I myself once was driving home a van filled with, well, we used to, many years ago, we had a friend who started a church. It was a black church. It's on TV now. We don't go to that church anymore for reasons I'm not going to discuss here. But we went to this church, and many of them didn't have driver's licenses, members of the congregation. So I offered to drive the van to pick up people. I mean, that's a Sunday morning. We would just do that. We would just back and forth. I probably took 4 trips before Mass, before service, before the band started praise and worship. I probably took 4 or 5. Sometimes it was more. It was a fast-growing church, and it had 2 locations. And I got pulled over simply because I was driving a van in that neighborhood, and I was white, and the van was filled with a bunch of African Americans that the police were looking at like, what is he doing? There was no reason to pull me over. And it was worse than that. Later, they didn't believe. They thought it was like some kind of scam. Like I wasn't really doing that. They brought the dog in the pastor's car and everything. In the pastor's van. German Shepherd's like scratching up his new van. So yeah, there is that unfairness that exists. But again, if policing is going to target the areas where more crimes are committed, that will lead to more interactions between the police and civilians. And that, of course, will lead to inflated numbers. That is absolutely going to happen. Absolutely. All right. If I miss some other question, hit me up on it and I will answer it. I just really want to get into these election results, right? So last night we do have, let's see if we got some more reported here from the last time I checked this morning before I headed out. Okay, let's start with, Montana's a red state, but we're also going to talk about some blue states. No, it is. We do have some more. All right, there was no Republican primary in the District of Columbia, but just for your own reference, Joe Biden only is at 77% of the vote in the District of Columbia, a little bit more. Okay, let's look at somewhere where there was a primary. Donald Trump has more than double the vote share in Indiana. Why does that matter? Like Indiana's going to be close. Barack Obama, folks, if you remember, Barack Obama in Indiana. In 2020, Donald Trump ran it up. But just the other day, there was a poll in Indiana. It was close. There was a poll in Missouri. It was close. I took one look at those polls and thought to myself, that's BS. I'm furthering my take on that now because Donald Trump is in the 90s with 76% reporting. He is at over 92% vote share. That roughly translates into about more than 450,000 votes, which is 156 more than Joe Biden has right now. Joe Biden is sitting at 76% of the vote in the state of Indiana. Bernie Sanders gobbled up 54,513 votes so far, actually took a delegate. All right. Trump lost no delegates last night, or at least as of now. Biden has a chance to secure the not clinch nomination. We'll wait to make, like I said, I want to wait until we have more votes counted before I make such drastic pronouncements here. But Indiana is a state where, I know it may sound crazy to some of you, but Democrats believe, because of how 2008 went, they could go on the offense in a state like that. Ditto Missouri, where there's a large black population, that if white voters turn against Donald Trump enough, it can offset some of these states. All right, these are states he overwhelmingly won in 2016, overwhelmingly. For all intents and purposes, the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination ended 3 months ago. There has been no opposition to Joe Biden. Not only has there been no opposition to Joe Biden, but every single one of his former rivals has endorsed him and given their full-throated support of him. And actually, just saw some Indiana came in and ticked his vote share down a little bit more. A couple hundred more went to Bernie Sanders. Pete Buttigieg, he took 4% of the vote. Warren took about 3%. But I want you to focus on this Bernie number and then the overall, what is really an anti-Biden vote. But why does Bernie matter? It's pretty well established in the polling that we saw, not just when it was competitive, but after the primary effectively ended. The candidate with the largest number or percentage of his supporters or her supporters that were anti-Biden 100%. You could call him never Biden. It was obviously Bernie Sanders. In 2016, depending on the battleground state, Bernie Sanders' voters went about 12 to 18% of them, depending on what state it was, went to Donald Trump. The national average was about, depending on who you're looking at, about 16%, 14%. When we look at where these votes are coming from, you would think that Donald Trump has essentially exhausted that overlap. Bernie Sanders lost this nomination. If you look at the maps, it's complete reverse from 2016 against Hillary Clinton. He lost this nomination because he didn't get any working class people. They were essentially Trump voters. Not any, but most of his coalition was a rural coalition in 2016. It was a suburban coalition. Hillary Clinton won the big cities, won the urban areas, won the metro areas. He did not. He ran up his margin. His stunning defeat of Hillary Clinton in 2016 in Michigan was due to the rural vote overtaking her edge in Wayne County and elsewhere. Bernie Sanders did better among voters, not voters, but areas. Let's just say region, to be more specific. He did better in the areas where Republicans typically carry the state. Okay? He did much better than he did this time around. This time around, those voters essentially bailed on him. And I'm hearing that there's here, let me break for 1 second here. Hang on 1 second, folks, before I continue my stream of thought. But let me see if I can do this again. Basically, Periscope gave me some kind of warning. If you can't do it on Periscope, folks, then you'll have to go to YouTube. All right. Let's see if it restarted. Yep, it restarted. All right. Good. I'm glad, because I did see people just hitting me up on my corner of my eye. Hey, what happened to Periscope? I can't see it. Check out the YouTube, folks. Just go to YouTube. All right. I know you guys like it on Scope because it's so easy on Twitter. Keep it in another tab open while you work or while you surf on Twitter, because it's much, much faster. And a lot of you bailed on Facebook, so maybe you don't do live, but it's much better quality on Facebook Live too. But yeah, I will send this out in a hot minute. All right. I don't want to lose my we're coming up on the break, and I'll do it on the break. I don't want to lose my train of thought. But in essence, where I'm going with this is,
Bernie's coalition was in regions in 2016 that are Republican regions. He was getting the minority of Democrats that live in those areas. It's completely backward this time. It's not that he doesn't have any support there. He does. But it's not what it was in 2016. And Joe Biden is winning some of that more conservative vote. He's taking what is remaining, the working class vote, what of that remains. But it's shocking. It is not expected that this time around, there is a greater number of Bernie Sanders supporters who say they're going to vote for Donald Trump than there was in 2016. In some states like Minnesota, that was 40%. 40% of Bernie's voters said, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I will vote for Donald Trump, or I will not vote. But that was a huge number. So in a state like Indiana, Bernie's taking 15% of the vote. Even if 15% goes to Donald Trump, it's 10,000 votes. Another 10,000. Even if 20% goes to it, then it could be huge. Even the ABC Washington Post poll, they themselves said, in 2016, we found about 14% of Bernie voters say they will vote for Donald Trump. This time, I think it's around 18 for them. That's shocking considering the way that the votes are shaping out on the map and where they're coming from when we cross-reference them. And I think we did this on about 2 months ago. We did this on PPD for you. Those Bernie voters that bailed in 2016, that did not vote for Hillary Clinton and voted for Donald Trump, they are Trump voters right now. Bernie Sanders bailed on them, really. Everyone says, oh, he's so authentic. You know where he stands. Bernie never changes. He changed. He did a complete 180 on immigration. He did a complete 180 on gun rights. Bernie used to have an almost perfect score from the NRA. Now they're a terrorist organization to him. He's washing my hands of you. And on issues like immigration, Bernie, for years, for decades, said that illegal immigration is bad for the American worker and opposed it. Illegal immigration drives down wage growth for American workers. Now, open the gates. Let everybody in. Don't give me this crap. He's authentic. But it's surprising because those voters where that synergy was in 2016, where that overlap was in 2016, those voters are now essentially just Trump voters. They did not return to Bernie Sanders, most of them. They are staying Trump voters and have stayed. They did not return in, a significant number to Bernie. So it would be something else that's going on. Maybe a hatred of Joe Biden, or not hatred, but just an opposition to the corporate Democrat Democrat wing. And the Democratic Party is a corporate party. It is. It is a party of corporate everything. So I don't know what wing of the Democratic Party everyone else is talking about. That's all that remains of the Democratic Party. We saw that Bernie was going to win this thing, but he made two real serious mistakes. He left those voters, he ostracized. Isolated is not even a good. He ostracized those voters that he relied on in 2016. He ostracized them because he went after Donald Trump too hard on issues that he supported just 4 years ago. And then the second thing he did was what he always does, which is be too damn weak against Joe Biden. Too damn weak. Too damn weak against everybody else. But Joe was always the biggest threat to him. And they coalesced. And they stopped him. He was going to win that thing. Absolutely was. All right, so Indiana, 76%. Looks like it shifted a little bit, but for the most part, Bernie is taking about 14% of the vote in Indiana. Donald Trump has near universal support. Maryland is the best state for Joe Biden at about 85. It was 86 before, so it ticked down again. Bernie got 6%. Uncommitted got 3%. Elizabeth Warren got 2%. That's Joe's best state. A neighboring liberal state. That's his best state. Let's keep going. By the way, Donald Trump, he got 89% of the vote almost in Maryland. So even he has a more consolidated base. Everyone is going to say, yeah, but there's no one really on the ballot. Bill Weld is still on the ballot. And yeah, but it's not a competitive race. Neither is this. This race, neither is the Democratic side. The Democratic side has been over. For all intents and purposes, the Democratic side, that race has been over for nearly 3 months. He's gotten everyone's endorsement. His former opponents, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, everybody, George W. Bush, everybody has endorsed Joe Biden. And yet there is a large chunk of the electorate who is refusing to vote for him. It is not a good sign. We saw this with Trump in 2016 for a while, but then it was over. His primary went on and on and on and on, and there was just like, it got little smaller as the time went on, and there was this fierce resistance to him that ended up shrinking as the time went on, but he had to fight well, all the way to Indiana, all the way to now, and the schedule has changed. It's not apples to apples, but this is the best we can do. He had to fight to basically now, where he dominated eventually in Indiana, and they folded and called it a day. Joe Biden, his best state, the only state where he's got more than 8 in 10 is Maryland, a neighboring, very liberal, very blue state. We're going to come back and go over some more after the break, okay? But this is something that I was looking for because I expected at this point for this to fade away. And it has not faded away. And with the polls not coalescing for him, if you say, do you support Bernie Sanders? Did you support Bernie Sanders? And ask those people how they're going to vote. There are large numbers of these people who say they will not vote for him. They will vote for Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has near universal Republican support. Regardless of all the anecdotal crap you see on Twitter, all the elite Republicans like George W. Bush, Donald Trump remains with historic vote shares among his own party. And I think that you cannot discount that. Again, I am somebody who believes Donald Trump is in trouble. This is not a affirmation show. He is a very vulnerable incumbent president. But this is remarkable, and you cannot ignore it. All right? We'll be back after the break. All right? You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. We're going to take like a 2-minute break, and we'll be back after this from the Bowen Band, the Grammy-considered Bowen Band, Bad Habit theme song.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a night, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
And we're back. Weird numbers from Change I was just looking at. We'll talk about that, and I will answer Jeffrey's question in a hot minute. But let's finish going through some of these states, the state results, and then we can take a look at some of the numbers that just came out from Change.org, who's polling for CNBC. I will tell you this about Change, all right, because I get a lot of questions about them. They're new. They came out in 2018. You know, they were bad in some, not bad. They were wrong in some states, right in others, where others were wrong, where the general consensus was. So they bucked the general consensus in some of these states and got it right. They have Trump out in front in Arizona, Trump out in front in Pennsylvania, down in Michigan a little bit, down in Florida by 1. Florida is very hard to poll. I don't think a new polling firm should take a crack at it. They got Trump up in Pennsylvania by 4, Trump up by 1 in Arizona. It's a tie in Wisconsin, Biden by 3 in Florida, Biden by 2 in Michigan, Biden by 1 in North Carolina. That goes to show you that happened in 2018 with them. Just some really weird numbers that, you can't, but they're, they're showing a competitive race all around. They are a complete panel poll, so I think that's worth considering, but it shows a competitive race. Nationally, Biden was only up by a few points. I think when you're looking at this, and to get into Jeffrey's question, let's take a look at some other states, and I'll answer that, because if the race is that close, the enthusiasm gap can screw you. This happened to Hillary Clinton, and people are not asking it the way we ask. In 2016, in our tracking poll, if you go back and look, and I've showed you this on the show before, it wasn't just, are you, how enthusiastic? Are you enthusiastic? Are you not? We broke it down. Are you extremely enthusiastic? Are you very enthusiastic? Are you moderately enthusiastic? Are you not enthusiastic at all? Are you extremely likely to vote? And then all that gets compared to the voter file, their vote history in the voter file. Not too many pollsters do that. Why? It costs more money. Laura will kick my butt if I do that again this year because we're building a house. She will kick my butt. But when media companies come to me, I refuse to do it any other way because I'm not putting my reputation on the line unless I do something granular. Usually we're still less because live caller polling is tens of thousands of dollars, and online polling is less. But I've got to at least dedupe against the voter file. I've got to know who I'm polling, and I just won't do it. I don't care. I don't need the money that badly. Everybody needs money, but I care more about my reputation than I do about getting a media contract that I don't think is
going to pay enough to make this done, to make this a product that I can not only hand to them, but hand to you, because ultimately it's going to the public. I have to be that sure with myself. I don't like it any other way, and I won't do it any other way. So anyway, let's look at Montana to basically answer this question. We're going to look at a few more, but Montana, Republicans vastly outvote Democrats. It's no shocker. It's a red state. Joe Biden got 74% of the vote. Donald Trump got 94% of the vote. Okay. New Mexico, a state we've gone over, the unicorn. Donald Trump got 92% of the vote. Joe Biden got 73% of the vote. Granted, Joe Biden got more votes. There are more Democratic votes than there are Republican votes. It is a blue state. Regardless of what people tell you, it is a blue state. And, Bernie Sanders, because there are a lot of young voters. It's like not like Colorado anymore as much as it used to be, but it does have a younger vote constituent. Bernie Sanders got 15%. That's a problem. 6% went to Elizabeth Warren. 3% voted for uncommitted. And Donald Trump is once again in the 90s. Pennsylvania, where change.org has Trump up by 4. 77% for Joe Biden. Almost 20% for Bernie Sanders. Tulsi Gabbard got the remaining vote, which when you break it down by tens of percentage points, which we do when we poll, it's just under 4%. Tulsi got almost 30,000 votes. Trump's entire margin in the state. Bernie Sanders got 150,000 votes. Joe Biden got 593,000. Donald Trump got 794,000, almost 800,000 votes. He got 95% of the vote. Rhode Island, Joe Biden, blue state, folks, blue state. Joe Biden, 62% of the vote. Bernie Sanders, 30% of the vote. Donald Trump, 95% of the vote. 94, sorry. I thought that said 94.5. It's 94.35. Again, blue state. There was no Republican primary in South Dakota, as most of you, I'm sure, know. Joe Biden got one of his higher vote shares here, 76% of the vote. It's a red state. It will go to Donald Trump. Hawaii. Joe Biden on May 23rd, by the way, got 56% of the vote. Bernie Sanders got 30. All right, so I don't want to keep going because that's the end of the June 2nd primary. What does this tell me? What is this telling me? Joe Biden's going to have an enthusiasm problem. He has got to do something to get the remaining voters that refuse to vote for him. This primary has been over for 3 months. Over. It effectively ended on Super Tuesday, and everybody knows it. But apparently, about 30% of the Democratic Party, which is what, by the way, polls have been showing us. That's pretty clear. If you ask Democratic voters, are you happy with Joe Biden? At least a third in these voters in these polls are going to tell you no. They're not happy with him. When you ask Bernie Sanders voters, are you going to vote for Joe Biden? Upwards of a fifth, they're saying no in national polling. In a state like Pennsylvania, that's a problem. That is a big problem. And by the way, I want to mention on Pennsylvania, this isn't good for Democrats at all. They had a huge, just a week ago, they were all over Twitter. Look at how many more ballots Democrats have requested. Republicans are going to get trounced. They voted. They voted in a primary that's not even a contested primary. Barack Obama did not get votes like this in 2012. And he received, by the way, if this was happening to Donald Trump, it would be the biggest story. Barack Obama received the lowest share of a primary vote than any presidential incumbent candidate since Pat Buchanan challenged George Herbert Walker Bush. If this was Donald Trump, it would be wall-to-wall coverage. Wall-to-wall coverage. Yeah, there are some really interesting numbers out there, Jimmy. I mean, Connecticut is a state that I have long argued Republicans can win. They can win that state. Absolutely. They're using the wrong issues, but they can win that state. I know everyone will be like, oh, it's ridiculous. They are more capable of winning Connecticut than they are some of the other states that Brad Parscale keeps telling Donald Trump he's doing so well in. Look at that vote in New Mexico. That is a very heavy lift. And if you guys did not, you can go on the YouTube playlist, on the Inside the Numbers playlist, go find where we did the analysis, the voter analysis in New Mexico. We did the voter analysis. We told you what happened in 2016. We went all the way back to Bush v. Gore. It's a very heavy lift. And I think last night's vote kind of cemented that. Whoever used that word first on this show and the thing, it's a unicorn. They nailed it. It's a unicorn. You are much, 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 much more likely to win states with depressed economies, large numbers of white working class people. That is where you can break that cycle. That is where you can break through a blue wall. In 2018, it was a almost D+10 mood in the House vote, and Bob Stefanowski almost defeated an incumbent Democratic governor. And in fact, I know a lot of Republicans up there who believe that was taken from Bob. And people, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. I want to leave some time for questions. Mrs. Producer always yells at me when I don't. Right. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. How the hell do these people think that's those states fell? Ohio by nearly 10. Pennsylvania for the first time since 1988. Wisconsin for the first time since 1988. Michigan for the first time since 1988. Wisconsin for the first time since 1984. How the hell do they think that happened? By unicorn fantasies that Trump is at 50% with Hispanics in New Mexico? I'm getting a little irritated with this. I'm sure he's a very nice guy, but he sure as hell is not a political guy. And if you heard me yesterday, then you heard my frustration. He should have been on his hands and knees. Do not do this. Do not shut this economy down. By the way, all of those public health experts that called you a grandma killer for wanting your job back, for saying we had to kill the economy and commit economic suicide, tons of them signed a joint letter yesterday, reported by NPR. They're waiving that now for these protesters. Why? Because racism has long been a public health problem, and racism spreads COVID. If that ever told you everything, if anything could tell you everything that you need to know about what led to what were their motivations behind shutting this economy down, that's it. There you have it. I wouldn't say New Mexico is a lost cause. I'm simply saying it's a heavy lift, and campaigns don't have finite amount of resources. Colorado is a lot easier for a Republican to win, and given they have a competitive Senate race there where Cory Gardner is in deep trouble, they should focus it there. Arapahoe County, Arapahoe County, Arapahoe County. Absolutely. Minnesota's another one that for people who have followed me a long time, you know that when I have been asked my opinion by these people, I had been telling them since the days of Mitt Romney, Minnesota is always several points more Republican than Michigan ever was, or at least at that time, and that Minnesota would be easier to flip with the right candidate and the right message than Michigan, because Republicans had always gone after Michigan like it was fool's gold. And polls would always show it was a close race. Romney made a play for it because his dad, he thought his daddy's history was going to help him. It is a total joke. Made a last-minute ditch for Pennsylvania. Was misled. I know the backstory on that, but I'm not going to tell it. He was misled. But Michigan and Pennsylvania, always more just a few points apart, very close all the time. And then you had Minnesota, they completely ignored. Why? Because they would look at it superficially and say, well, it's the only state that voted for Walter Mondale in 1984. Reagan won everything. That was 1984. Walter Mondale was from Minnesota, and he only won it by a few thousand votes. It almost fell. It almost fell. It almost fell against with George W. Bush. Almost took it. Yes, when they'll tell you, that's because Ralph Nader was on the ballot. No, it's because you didn't win enough of the rural vote. If Republicans could hold the Twin City suburb level of support that they used to have during those, Bush v. Gore, even Bush v. Kerry, and be able to drive it up with the working class and in rural areas like Donald Trump does, they'd carry that state. Donald Trump was just a hair too low in the Milwaukee suburbs, in the Twin City suburbs. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm thinking. He was just a hair. Polling at him at about 46. He trailed by 2 points in our polling in Minnesota, which everybody said that's BS. That's not real. Oh, it was real. 770 something responses. It was real. 2 points because his margin and his support in the Twin City suburbs was only about 46%. Then it would bob like 45, 47, 45, 47. Exit poll showed it came in right around where we had it, about 46%. He really needed to pump it up a little bit there. The Salt Lake City Tribune poll, which has Biden leading somehow, has Trump at 54 in those Twin City suburbs. If he's at 54 in the Twin City suburbs, he's almost assuredly, he's very highly likely that he would carry. Unless Biden does much better in the rural areas than recent Democratic candidates have done. I think in the end, that's just not going to happen. I think if Biden wins the election, he'll win it because he does much better in the suburbs than Hillary Clinton did. And that's where, 54% the Salt Lake City Tribune has him in the Twin Cities. If that's true, again, I'd like to poll that one myself very soon too. But there are areas in the Northeast that Republicans have essentially dismissed. And I think it's very foolish. Economic change brings about political change. That's how maps shift. Economic and demographic change. The Northeast is one of the few areas of the country where the Republican trend, which is the increase in the white vote, the trend in the increase of the vote share for Republican candidates, that is one area of the country that has bucked the trend. It's really more accurate to say the rate of increase has been much, much less. Well, that's because if you're not playing a game, you can't win. If you don't swing the bat, you can't get on base. Right? When was the last time you ever saw a Republican make a serious play for that? When Republicans do make a serious play, it's at the gubernatorial level. It's only recently that they've fallen short here and there. But up until 2014, The Nutmeg State had been run by Republicans basically on and off, on and off, on and off. The pendulum swung. Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. And it's, definitely something like law and order would be a big issue. Last time we dipped our toe in Connecticut, the issue that white parents cared about was the transgender issue. So in transgender in sports. So there are, it's a big deal up there. And scholarships are being robbed from their children that are working their butts off. So if you're the father or the mother of a daughter who runs track and has been running track her whole life, is going to pay for her college through that, or even wants to move on to advance competitions. And then some guy who thinks he's a girl comes along and sprints on past her. It might piss you off. Right? So anyway, yes, that's a great point. Look at Lackawanna. That's supposed to be around Biden town. Biden hasn't been home. Biden hasn't called Pennsylvania home for many, 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 many years. And if this is a traditional campaign, which they're trying to make sure that it's not, but if it is a traditional campaign, then Biden he is vulnerable on these issues in the areas that the media keeps telling you he's going to be the one to change the tide. It won't be. It'll be that he does better in Philadelphia County suburbs and even maybe Bucks. And we're going to look at that in a second in the voter file, because like we did with Nevada yesterday, where are all of these votes that the Republican National Committee, Donald Trump, and Ronna McDaniel, and the state Republican parties, where are all these votes that are ineligible voters? Where are they coming from? So if the state mails out to everybody on a roll, Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post is going to tell you, oh, it's not true. There won't be any fraud because these people are only people who are registered to vote. It isn't true that people who are illegal or people who are ineligible are going to get it. Only people who are registered to vote will get these ballots. That is BS, as I have now showed you in 3 different states, and we're going to show you again in Pennsylvania in a hot minute. That is not true. We're going to look at Pennsylvania in a second. Where are these votes? Clark County in Nevada yesterday showed you represented 68% of the total votes statewide in the state of Nevada. Yet it represented 80% of voters who are inactive, deceased, or have a change of address flag. The Clark County registrar was forced to send ballots to every one of them. And as Fox News, the Las Vegas Review Journal have reported, that has resulted in ballots hanging from apartment complexes on corkboards, being stuffed, flying out of trash cans, littered all over the streets of Las Vegas. In Arizona in 2018, they were dumpster diving for those ballots. They were dumpster diving to submit those ballots, to find them and submit them. And in the case of Nevada, it's especially concerning because some of that $330,000 that the Clark County Commission, which is dominated by Democrats, approved will go to hiring ballot harvesters. Don't worry. You didn't grab your ballot off the corkboard? Don't worry. They'll get it for you. And they'll sign it. Why? Because signature verification has been waived. No worries. No one's going to check if that's your signature or not. And as Chris Matthews, right before the quick little break here, as Chris Matthews once said, the former host of Hardball on MSNBC, as he once flatly admitted on national television, Philadelphia has been doing this for years. As the indictment clearly proves, even election judges will stuff the ballot box if you pay them enough money to do so. Right, Mr. DeMuro? Right? Oh, that's just one ward. That's just one ward. First of all, it's not just one ward. It's an ongoing investigation, and the guy's talking. That's number one. Number two, do you know how many votes can be in one ward in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia area? As if it's just like we're talking about 200 votes. It's crazy. And it adds up pretty damn soon. I have to agree with one of the commenters. I was extremely, extremely surprised by Donald Trump, who is effectively running unopposed to Bill Weld. I am extremely surprised by the number of votes that came out of Biden's own area for Donald Trump compared to Biden. And then statewide overall, because as I just showed you, if you think the 200,000 votes that went to Bernie Sanders are Joe Biden's votes to lose, you're nuts. You are nuts. You are living on a cloud in fairy tale land, along with the Trump voter who thinks there's no possibility he could lose. You're both up there sharing a bong, dude. You're hookahing it together. Tubes coming out of all ends. That, if I was Joe Biden, I'd be very nervous about those results in Pennsylvania. I would have wanted clobbered him 3-1. I would have wanted to see a traditional primary for an incumbent first-term president, or at least because it's Donald Trump, maybe I know it's not going to be traditional, so I'd want to see something like really close to it, you know? Barack Obama, like I said, if it was Donald Trump, what happened to Barack Obama would be the number one story. Donald Trump gets the smallest vote share of any incumbent president since 1991, 1992. He's going to lose. He's going to lose. The Republican Party doesn't want him. George Bush endorsed the Democrat. You've seen all this crap on Twitter. Who the hell cares what they... As if George W. Bush voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Stop insulting people's intelligence with these ridiculous stories. Bill Kristol, Jonah Goldberg, George W. Bush. We all know George W. Bush did not vote for Donald Trump. He very likely voted for his good buddy Bill Clinton's wife, even though he refuses to say. Karl Rove and everybody else who gets pinned down over it. Dana Perino probably too. I don't know if she knows or not, but I'm sure Karl does. Every time somebody tries to pin him down, they want you to feel like, well, maybe he voted for Gary Johnson. He voted for his buddy's wife. Cut the crap. Who gives a damn what George W. Bush thinks anyway? George W. Bush single-handedly presided over the destruction of the Republican Party as an effective national political force. Anyway, 11:33, or wait, 4, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It is 11:34. And it is Wednesday, June 3rd. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Welcome along. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. Don't forget to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily on YouTube. We are almost there to our first milestone. Don't forget to subscribe to it. And then when you do, hit that notification bell so it will let you know right before we go live. Don't forget to like the page People's Pundit Daily on Facebook, which we have neglected for years and need to make look like our Twitter following. All right. And then, of course, ultimately, the best way to support the show, the best way to support what we do is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily, which you can do by going to peoplespunditdaily.com, choosing a digital subscription, or taking the short link, ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. Thank you to all who have done so in the little surge we have had since we've started this show. We love you for it. That's how we're able to even bring you this stuff. And it's how we're able to show you what we're going to show you after this quick little timeout. They have these tools because they have the money. For some reason, alternative media thinks they can just beat them at their own game and not show anything of value or anything that's new. We are the only ones that you can come to and see this information. Nobody else is going to do a podcast where we open up the voter file and show you that they're full of crap. Nobody else is going to do it. I am going to take a quick 1-minute break. All right. And when I come back, I need some water. I need to answer something about YouTube. When I come back, we will take a look at Pennsylvania and where these votes are coming from. You know what? I'll play the music, but I'm going to interrupt it. So just fair warning, I'm going to interrupt it in about a minute. I'm not going to take the whole thing. All right, I'll be back in a hot minute, folks.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
All right, like I said, we're going to interrupt it. All right, I'm back. I am the bad habit. I'm your 10 a.m. to 12 noon bad habit. And I got my own damn bad habit, as a matter of fact. Can't stop with these things, folks. I love them. They taste too good. Tell you, all right? It's better than smoking. It's better than vaping, right? Building the house. I want to live to see the house. You know what I mean? Kids, they'll guilt the hell out of you too. Let me tell you. All right. As soon as I get into this, we'll take a look at Pennsylvania, and I will try to do it fairly quickly. I'm not going to do it the way we did it yesterday, because sure as hell enough, when we got back to Twitter, people were like, "Oh, those are just pictures." I went through it. I actually pulled it up anyway to confirm that they weren't just pictures. That is the damn query in the voter file. It's like you just can't please everybody. Sometimes you can't, some of these people, you just can never please them, you know? All right, here's the voter file. There it is. Let's make sure you guys can see it pretty well. I'll zoom in one more time. When I zoom in too much for myself, it makes it difficult for me to see it, you know? Yeah, that's a little bit even difficult for you to see. All right, there it is. That's about as good as we're going to get. We're going to go to Pennsylvania. I'm doing this with you now, so you guys know I'm not full of crap. All right. We're going to spin the votes in Pennsylvania. State summary, about 8.7 mil. All right. Pennsylvania, just so you know, let me take a brief refresher on myself here. But for the Rust Belt poll, I parsed out the average share of the vote for each of the Rust Belt states that will be in the poll. Okay. Whether it's two-party vote or total vote share. The state of Pennsylvania is
about 26% of the total Rust Belt vote. And it really is mid-Atlantic region, but we call it, we put it in the Rust Belt poll anyway, because like Ohio, it has Appalachia region, and then because of the demographics of the state. Pennsylvania is almost two states. You have those Appalachia counties, which represent the vast majority of the total counties in Pennsylvania. And then you have, of course, the southeastern part of the state, which looks more like Jersey, or at least some parts of Jersey, but it doesn't look like the rest of the state. And then you have the north, and then you have the eastern part right outside of Pennsylvania, where Bucks and North, where Donald Trump did extremely well for a Republican candidate. And that is also more like the other area of the state. It's more like it than it is like Philadelphia. So here we go. Here is the total amount. Individuals, just under 8 million. Here you can see it says the data type, demographics, for both of these query indicators. The data type is demographic. The data point is deceased. That is what we're looking at. Dead voters. And the change of address flag is the other one. It says equal. What's the operator? It's a query, like querying any other database, for those who understand what I'm talking about. Whether you do computer programming or you do WordPress development, you know what I'm talking about. It works like a query. You set the parameters. It queries a database like a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. And when we export them, that's what we export them as, CSVs that can translate into spreadsheets. And then we upload them to whatever polling software we're using. That's how this works. All right. Here it's being told to exclude those dead people and exclude those who have a change of address flag. All right. And then here's that number when we do 7.8. Okay. I am going right now to change that. There it is. Checked. Exclude deceased. It's checked. Moved. Exclude movers. It's checked. I'm going to uncheck them. Okay. And I'm going to update it. Remember, 7.6. All right. Now we're at 8.7. Just so you understand, that's how much that changed. When I do not exclude dead people, okay? When I do not exclude the dead, that's how much it is. Let's get even more specific here, because I want to show you how much of it statewide resides in the strongest of Democratic strongholds in the state. Okay? So go to vote history. We go to voter status. Right now it's saying include all voters. We're going to include only inactive voters. These are the voters that Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman of the RNC, these are the voters that she is talking about when she tried to clean up what Donald Trump said, because while the crux of what he said is accurate, or at least the concern, the potential for fraud is accurate, that statement, he didn't say it correctly, and it allowed the media to BS their way through it. But we're talking about only inactive voters, what Ronna is talking about, what the RNC lawyers are talking about when they file counter lawsuits. There it is. 829,180. Okay? That is a lot. For those of you who don't know, that is a lot of voters. How much did Donald Trump win the state of Pennsylvania by in 2016, folks? He won it by about 40,000 votes. Okay? I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's about as clear as I can do. Let me just zoom in one more time, just so you know I am not telling you a lie. There are, and this is unique individuals, because it would be a lot less if the verification procedures remained. But the Democratic lawsuits do not want the verification procedures to remain. Okay? Whether it's signature matching or whatever it may be. They are trying to bypass those. And many times, in many states, what they're asking the courts to do is against state law. And yet several of them have buckled. to pressure. So far, the RNC in this state won a huge victory because the Commonwealth State Court rejected the lawsuit that specifically said they want to be allowed to count ballots after Election Day. It doesn't mean they still can't play around, because they can. And if I was Rona, I'd get very damn specific, very damn quick. But at least, let's say come Election Day, like it was in 2016, Hillary was trailing by 60,000 votes. They whittled that down to 40-something, but she was trailing by roughly 60,000 votes. And recounts and this and that got it down a little bit more. But what they tried to do in Florida in 2018, they were able to do in some instances, count these votes afterward. That's when it starts to get hairy. I found thousands of provisional ballots over here. I found, thousands in the trunk. This guy had 8 boxes. This one had 2 crates. There's a reason why those protections are written into law, because there are so many records that you could fudge. 4 or 5 volunteers can fill a hell of a lot of these in very quickly. And then, oops, all of a sudden, I got a bunch of provisional ballots. We found them. They were in a warehouse. They were in a closet, a janitor closet, like down here in Florida. They just happened to break 95-5 for the Democrats. All right. Some of the votes that came in Arizona. The margin in Maricopa County was established between mail-in vote, early in person, and Election Day vote. The model had established the break. It said McSally would carry Maricopa by a hair, which meant she was going to win statewide by about 0.2% to 1.2%. But what happened was 180,000 ballots came in after Election Day. They were counted after Election Day. And they broke heavily for Sinema out of nowhere. That doesn't happen. So Democrats wanted to be able to count votes afterwards. We have 829,180 statewide. Let's break it down by jurisdiction. Okay? Let's use county as the jurisdiction. Let's go to Philadelphia County. Remember the number. Let's only look at Philadelphia County. Okay? 123,032 just in Philadelphia County. That represents about 15% of the total problem statewide. Another one we'll add to the mix here, because this is the second biggest for them. Let's add Allegheny. Okay? Pittsburgh. Let's redo it again. 148,216. That represents a total of about 18%. So why am I saying this? As with Nevada yesterday, although it's not as dramatic because Clark County isn't as lopsided as Philadelphia County is, but also it's more of the vote share than Philadelphia County is. But it remained in almost both cases. It's close here at Philadelphia. It's about what you would expect in Philadelphia. There are other Democratic strongholds in Pennsylvania, whereas in Nevada, it's just Clark, and then you have Washoe, which is now Democratic by a hair, but it's not lopsided. Like in Pennsylvania, you have 2 areas. You have Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, where it is going to be extremely lopsided. The problem here is even if you allowed this statewide, and let's say Republicans wanted to play the same game that Democrats play, that Chris Matthews told you they do in Philadelphia, you wouldn't be able to catch up. Even if Republican precincts, wards, did the same damn thing, they would not be able to catch up. Why? Because they simply don't have their share of the issue is not as big. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes, just in one county alone. Yeah, okay. So that's a great question. Why aren't the deceased automatically removed from the voter rolls? Okay. That's a great question. Because, like I've told you guys before, we are supposed to be the beacon of democracy. We are supposed to be the prime example of self-governance. In truth, we run our elections like a third world country. Anyone who served in the military during Mr. Bush's nation building exercise, you know that actually emerging democracies can be, even with supervision, can be more, can have more election integrity than what you'll see in the United States. The National Voting Registration Act of 1993 requires this to take place, but many states do not. They simply don't do it. There are different time periods that they are supposed to go through and make sure that their rolls are cleaned. That's the terminology we use here. But they don't. They leave them dirty. They leave them dirty. One study of the 2016 election found at least 100,000 ballots in the state of Pennsylvania that were illegal residents. Now, you can dismiss that if you want to or not. But I'm telling you, they want you to believe it's impossible. It's a conspiracy theory. It's not. I'm showing you right now. Statewide, again, just let's remove jurisdiction. Statewide, there is 829,180 that should require some form of verification. Let's get rid of movers, because movers oftentimes are more, right? So let's exclude movers, but keep deceased in there, and you'll see it will go down quite a bit, but not as much as you might think. Of the 630,000 that I left in that query, when I removed exclude movers, but do not exclude deceased, it only went down to 548,000 and change. That's crazy. That's crazy. There is nobody, and this is what was so sad about Mike Pence's Election Integrity Commission. They didn't do diddly. They did nothing. Nothing. There are many states that do not comply with the MVRA of 1993. And there's nobody there to enforce it. This is what, if you're a Trump supporter, this should piss you off, because he takes to Twitter and bitches about it. And basically cries about it on Twitter. But he's the president of the United States. What is the job of the president of the United States? To enforce federal law. To enforce federal law. It is a federal law. That commission led nowhere. It went nowhere. It was very easy, actually, to fix this problem. A guy, myself, or a guy like me, could fix this problem fairly easily. First of all, we need to fix it in the long term. And I'm going to say this after every episode we do this week about this problem, because we're going to go into other states soon. I'm just going to stick with the states where the Democrats have filed lawsuits and then Republicans have countered. I'm not going to go fishing for potential voter fraud. I'm going to stick to the states and the areas that they brought up, not me. They brought up. So tomorrow we'll do Michigan. Okay? Just to give you a little sneak peek, tomorrow we'll do Michigan. But this was an easy problem to fix. In the end, long-term, to fix it, you need statewide standardization. This can be this number up here that you see. And actually, it would be a greater number than that, because we would not want to exclude movers for the total number. It's asking me one or more types. Do not exclude, only inactive. Let's get rid of do not exclude deceased. Let's exclude it again. It's having a little database hiccup. But overall, what we would want is that larger number is where I'm going with this. We would want that larger number. And then we would want, yeah, it's having a little glitch. We'd want that larger number. It's 11:55 anyway. And you would pull every single record in there. Every single one. It will come to you as numerous because it won't be one sheet. You'd probably have to break them up because it's a lot, million records almost. It would come to you as a giant CSV. If the state is standardized and the machines and everything is connected with standardization, what I mean by that is somewhere a central hub knows what votes were cast in Ward K, Ward C, Ward D, whatever. And then it will compare the votes that are submitted with the votes that the state failed to clean because they're not in compliance with the MVRA of 1993, and then it will be flagged. Now, if somebody cast that in person, because there will be some instances of just, it's not that it's necessarily fraud. It's that maybe is a change of address flag, or maybe the person is listed as inactive because they haven't voted for so long, but they're legitimately voting now. So they would have to verify themselves. They would have to get a voter. This is why voter ID is important, but it's not an end-all be-all. It is not. That is just a small part of a very large plan to fix a very complicated problem, because we're a very big country. But anyway, that's what I mean by standardization. And then when it's uploaded, it would be compared. If something was flagged, they would have to prove themselves. Now, it would automatically cut down on what we saw happen in Philadelphia. I don't know, maybe you guys didn't see that show, but the consultant was running around paying off election judges to what is called ringing up votes, to do what is called ringing up votes. That is taking people, maybe they're not fraud ballots, they're real people. Maybe you decided you didn't like those candidates. You're not going to vote. It's a midterm presidential cycle, although this had to do with presidential elections too. Let's say you just didn't show up. Well, the election judge will find that ballot. He'll fill it in for you, and he'll throw it through the machine. Now you voted. Maybe you don't know it, but you voted. And guess what? You voted for his candidate. That is what he was indicted for. That is what he pled guilty to. The terminology is ringing up votes, vote ringing, whatever you want to call it. Now, that happens a lot as well. And if you're up to something, it would behoove you to make sure that you're doing that. So standardization, as far as what I'm talking about with these, all that would do is make sure that the movers, the change of address flags, those could not be rung up. But that's why voter ID and other verification standards that they are suing to remove, that can simply help with that element of the problem. But that does not prevent them from finding these ballots and ringing up these ballots. So that's why it really must be a comprehensive solution, because it's a comprehensive problem. It's a complicated problem. And it was more than a little disappointing to see the vice president do absolutely nothing with that commission. Because this is a problem that, if not can be solved in its totality, can be greatly addressed, like significantly. We can cut down quite a bit. And it almost doesn't matter what they say about whether it happens or not. It's the integrity that matters. The integrity. And of course they do it. That's BS, and I'm not going to entertain the ideas that they don't. They do. And they've been doing it for years. But it's the integrity of the system that matters most. We are a self-governing society. If people do not have confidence in our election system, in our elections, if they do not have confidence in election integrity, this thing will fall apart. And right now, if I mean, there's only so long you can go back with polling, but right now we have got to be at an all-time low. How does a rhino win in Nevada? Is that what you got? I mean, in Nebraska? I only got a couple of minutes, so I can't answer that. But there is a constituency in some of these Western states that don't like Donald Trump. And even, by the way, if it was somebody more on the conservative side of the spectrum, they wouldn't like them very much either. It's important. This is why I can't answer that in one session. But I will say they are very moderate. And they have a lot of roots of, not just moderate. A lot of if you rewind to the progressive era, it took hold in these states. Yes, Wisconsin is the birth of the progressive movement. But when you look at where William Jennings Bryan was popular, these states are now ruby red, right? Or they'll say ruby red. But there's a large constituency of Republicans who are not Republicans like you are a Republican if you support Donald Trump or you support, the Republican activist wing of the party. They're not. They are absolutely not. Oh, New England, NE. Oh, wow. That would be a working class coalition. I can answer that actually much quicker. It would be a working class coalition, a rural vote, working class, and a good shit. With the burbs, they don't have the problems that they've had in some of these other areas. There were special elections in Connecticut over the last year. And Republicans took a state Senate district that they haven't had in decades. It was like a family dynasty over there. And it was birth of, very heart of New England labor. And then the other one that they took was was an area of burbs. The only area the Democrats won were what carved up against, I don't want to say inner city because it's not really inner city, but definitely metro, right out, outside of Hartford. So it would be much like the coalition you see in some of these other Rust Belt states. It's just that they're so far behind. They haven't made those inroads. They would have to increase their share. It's not even like areas that they particularly lose, because they don't. They just have to win them by more. That's the answer to that. They'd have to go deeper into do better with women who are like national security moms kind of women. That turned hard on Republicans in 2018. That did them really dirty. But that's a great show. That's a great idea for a show, Jimmy, and maybe we will work to put that together. How Republicans can be insurgents in New England, because there are opportunities there, but you cannot get on base if you don't swing the bat. But I'm 3 minutes over already. Thank you guys for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You guys can follow me on Twitter right there if you don't already, at @peoples_pundit. Don't forget, before you leave, to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you do not already. Share it with your friends and family. Tell them to subscribe. Tell them you found the coolest show in the world and the only place where you can find stuff like we're doing here, and get them to sign on and start watching as well. And also to like the page, People's Pundit Daily, on Facebook, like we neglected for years. Let's bump that puppy up. All right. And then ultimately, the best way to support the show, of course, is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. And you can do that by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. We will see you back tomorrow with Michigan. Okay. We will do what we did here with Michigan and look specifically at Wayne County. Don't miss it. 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell, and it'll let you know before we go live. All the best, folks. See you tomorrow. See you on Thursday. Thanks for watching.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a night, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow